Mr. Chairman, Ms. Foster, do laws against abortion prohibit removing a dead fetus from the woman?
Absolutely not.
That's my understanding as well. Wanted to get that one out of the way because that continues to be repeated by the other side. Professor Murray, you concluded your testimony, both your written version and the oral form, by saying that you, quote, call on this committee to protect these associated rights in a manner that is swift and absolute. That was your last word, absolute. And I understand, of course, these associated rights, you're speaking about several, but certainly the right to abortion. Do you mean by that there should be no limits on it whatsoever, that it should be available until birth?
What I meant in my written testimony, Representative, and many thanks for the question, is that fundamental rights should not be left to the democratic process. These are fundamental rights that each individual has, and they should be protected as they were under the Constitution.
Do you mean that they are absolute? My colleagues, when we were discussing the Second Amendment the other week, reminded me often that no constitutional right is absolute, a point that I readily concede. Do you concede that there can be limits on the right to abortion?
It is not a concession to say that there is no fundamental right that is unfettered. I teach that to my students every day in my constitutional law class. The Second Amendment rights are not unfettered. They can be subject to government regulation, or at least they could until quite recently. All fundamental rights are subject to some limitations. But I asked for this committee to respond in a manner that was swift and absolute. I meant in terms of their commitment to protecting the rights of every person in the United States to enjoy these fundamental freedoms and not have their most intimate decisions made by the government.
Do you support the Women's Health Protection Act that is pending? That's what it's called by its sponsors. You've heard it referred to today, and I imagine you're familiar with it, that would allow abortion until the moment of birth?
Representative, I think that's a mischaracterization of the Women's Health Protective Act. I'm supportive of any measure that this chamber takes to assure the rights of individuals to be free in this country and to enjoy the equality that is promised to us under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And I'm happy to elaborate if you'd like.
Well, let me clear away then, if you said it's a mischaracterization of the bill, I don't think it is, but let me just ask you more directly. Do you favor the Congress providing that abortion shall be protected until the moment of birth?
I don't believe that abortion care allows for abortion until the moment of birth. That's not how this works. Individuals have the right to select an abortion. And when individuals do choose a late-term abortion, it's usually because something tragic has happened in a pregnancy that was very much wanted. My point that this is a mischaracterization is that you are using inflammatory language to essentially damn those who choose to have a late-term abortion, often because there are very few choices available to them because something tragic has happened in the course of a very much wanted pregnancy. That's my point.
Should the rights of the unborn child be weighed in the consideration of whether to allow a late-term abortion?
Well, I would respectfully note that in this court's decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992, the court allowed the state.
Rather than go back into the Constitution, I'm really just getting your advice because you're
sorry,
advising.
we're not talking about the Constitution. We can't
no,
go back.
I'm interested in your advice to the committee about that. You concluded that you urged the committee to protect these rights, and I'm asking not so much for a history of what the Supreme Court has said, but do you contend that the child's rights, unborn child's rights, should be weighed in considering whether to limit late-term abortion?
As I was saying, in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the court allowed the states to regulate for the potentiality of life. That was the leavening of both the women's right.
Do you believe it should be so limited?
It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the Constitution says and how that Constitution is interpreted.
Thank you. Ms. Warbelow, the Human Rights Campaign also supports the Democrats' bill that I just made reference to, for providing for abortion up until birth, potentially. Isn't that correct?
We support the bill, but again, like Professor Murray said, your statements are a mischaracterization of what the bill does. You
say that it could not protect the right to an abortion until the moment of birth. Is that what
that isn't how abortion care works, and in fact, to suggest that that's how abortion care works is really troubling and dangerous for women.
Okay, so only because you're saying that as a practical matter, that's not how abortions occur. Therefore, that the bill does allow, by its terms, it allows that. Isn't that correct?
It does not. You know, it's a mischaracterization of how the bill operates. As
Time
Professor
of the gentleman has expired, Mr. Stanton.